Hi, welcome to JavaScript. This is Christian here. This is still part of chapter 1. And so I'm going to go into the notes area. And I'm not going to cover everything in this notes here, but just want to show you again that you can, come and read this notes here. It has a lot of information in there. I added some stuff in here, which is most of this stuff are already covered in the textbook, but I just going to, break it down to some of the important stuff. And so, just for those of you who are interested in knowing more about JavaScript or EmaScript, you can always go to their GitHub site right here. So if I go here, for example, that will take me to the actual language spec for EmaScript. Okay, so it has everything here. It's about like almost 1,000-page document, but all your information, all your questions could be found in here, although it's not really well explained, and so you may not understand everything, but this is a really good reference. Okay, so in fact, some of these notes are actually coming from that source. I already went over the term JavaScript, what is and what is not JavaScript. So here's a list of some of those facts or things about JavaScript. Again, JavaScript is a very flexible language. You'll find that out later, but it is not Java, just for sure. It's not Java, or even a derivative of Java. But it does borrow a lot of the syntax from Java and a few other languages like Python and so forth. So some things about JavaScript are listed here. It is a object-based paradigm, okay, a language. Okay, it does have some flow in there, which is very similar to object-oriented approach in terms of coding, but is not a true object-oriented language. Okay, like Java or C++ or C# and so on. So here is a picture I wanted to show you. I didn't show this last time, but I couldn't find it. Just want to show you the different dimensions of computer languages, and as you can see, there are many, and this is not a complete list of dimensions of all those. But to show you where JavaScript lies in this pictorial here. So, assuming that this box here represents these many dimensions of a language, right? So you can see that the however you want to slice and dice this diagram here, it's up to you. So let's just say this left box here, so this entire left box on this side represents the low-level language, and then the right side here is the high level. So look at this, you see that they have most of the languages today are in the high level, and here I only list one assembly as a low level, and so that's where most languages lie right today. And then on the top two the top row here represent the specific purpose languages, and then you have the general purpose languages down here. Okay, so you can see that Mathematica, R, Lisp, and HTML, CSS, these are very specific, right? They serve only one purpose only. So HTML is used primarily for tag and web development, web pages. CSS just basically used to style those HTML tags. So it's high level, but it's also very specific. Okay, and then down here you have the general purpose, PHP, Visual Basic, C++, Java. You see all those here. And so JavaScript lies right here in the middle here. Initially, it was actually a very specific purpose. It was actually up here, I would say, in the 90s, let's say about 94, 95, 96 when it came out. It was designed specifically to provide interaction for web pages, so it was very specific. But over the years, over the decades, it evolves. So it evolves in becoming more of a general purpose language now, because now it's not only a client-side scripting language, but it's also a server-side with framework like the Node.js and many others. Okay, so it's becoming more of that. When I say more general purpose, means it's not only used for web development anymore. You can use that to create, especially games, computer games. If you ever use a Unity 3D game engine, JavaScript is one of the main languages in that program. So this is where JavaScript lies. And then you have this big box here. The entire box here will be what's called a strongly typed. Okay, and then this purple box here would be the loosely typed or dynamic type or weakly typed. There's like several names, several terms that mean the same thing. So we have the loosely typed, and then we have the strongly typed. Strongly typed are those languages that you have to declare a data type to either functions or variables in order to store data, right? So if you want to declare a variable called name, then you have to specify what data that name can store. What type of data? Is it going to be a strings only, or is it going to be numbers, or what, right? So you have to declare that before you can use it. With the loosely typed, that's what it means, loosely or dynamic type, is that the data type can be implicitly assigned. So you don't have to specify the data type. So I can just say a variable called name, and I just leave it as is. And as soon as you assign a value to that variable or the identifier, then the data type is assigned implicitly to that data, a variable. So that's what it means between loosely and strongly typed. We'll cover that in a minute, as see down there in the page here. But I want to show you, so this is an overview of these many languages, and hopefully that this is a helpful diagram to kind of to tell you what things are. Okay, so here again, I'm just going to put some things in this table to show you what JavaScript is again. And again, so as you can see, I didn't put this interpreted language versus compiled language as well. So you can see this is another dimension. And JavaScript is an interpreted language. It means it doesn't need to be compiled in order to run. It runs live on the browser, right? So it just be interpreted and then runs render right away on the browser, and you can see things happening live. And because of that, it's really fast. So it is cross-platform. It runs on most any system, from any OS machines to device type. You can run your browsers, run your iPhone, your many different devices. The generations of languages, read about that. That's kind of some interesting notes there. We're moving to something called the third generation, as you can see here, drag and drop. Procedural and object-oriented. Just one note I want to point here is that, again, JavaScript is not an object-oriented language. It's not a full-fledged language in that sense. But it does have some modifiers, which we didn't have it before. I think since the ECMAScript 5, then they included some of these modifiers, which is things like the private, public, and protected modifiers. Only if you're using the what's called a strict mode, and again we'll go over what that means. Again, this example of strongly typed and weakly typed, I'm using here Visual Basic to illustrate that. It just means that if you want to create a variable called number, right, you have to specify the data type before you can put that data type in there. Okay, so if it's a name, it's a string, then I can only hold strings, and I cannot put numbers into the name, for example. Okay, and same thing with the function here. This function here returns an integer, so therefore the return type must be integer only, right? In this case, of course, you have a double on double, but the return type will be converted to integer. A weakly type is like this. For example, you have a variable called box, and this could be PHP or JavaScript. Okay, this would validate for both of them, because JavaScript allows you to use the $sign too, whereas PHP you have to use $sign for an identifier. Just say I create a variable called box, and it's assigned the string Bob in there, and it's somewhere down the code I changed the value to now true, which is now a Boolean type, right? And then eventually also change it to a different number. So you can see that this box object can store many different types at any given time, because the data can be changed dynamically at any time. So that is, I guess you want to call it the upside or downside. It does have both in there. Whereas up here, you cannot change number anymore. If it's an integer, then it has to be integer or all the way. Same thing with a name and the other variables, right? So you can't change them, but these you can. And the good side is that, well, you don't have to worry about it. But the bad side is, well, how do you know if box is still true, or is it 35 now, or is it another object? So sometimes we have to check the data type to make sure you know the correct type in order to do some type of calculation, right? Okay, function also same thing, because you don't have to specify what type it needs to return, whereas in Visual Basic or Java you have to say, this function returns an integer, returns an array of something, right? Here you don't have to say in JavaScript. You can just specify, you can return anything you want. So in this example here, I can return 3 different data types. I can return numbers, string, and Boolean type, right? Based on the conditions here. So give you a lot of flexibility here. So in this case, if I were to call this function, I pass the values 5 and 6, then it's gonna return me the value or the text super, because 5 is less than 6. So, all right. JavaScript has a lot of built-in objects, or these are also called global objects, that we can use right away. Okay, and we'll go over some of these. Everything you put in blue here, I believe, will be covered in this course. Others will not. So these are more advanced stuff, things like the key, the vector, and a lot of the structured data, along with the many other stuff here. But we will cover JSON, which is a part of the structured data type here. So JSON is something out there, is very popular, it's really well known, so we cannot omit that part. But we will cover all the values, some functions, these are just functions, some fundamental objects, inside objects, and so on, number, dates, text, things like strings in regular expressions, and index columns, collections like arrays, for example. So that's a list of these categories, and of course inside each of these categories you have different types. So for example, down here we have the property values, right? These are global properties that are very common in JavaScript, and let's see a few others. Well, some languages have these similar property values. Like for instance, the infinity is something that you may not have heard of before. I mean, well, you heard the term, but what does it mean in terms of programming, right? So usually when you do something like a calculation of some type, especially a division by 0, that's one of the most common type of errors that you will discover in many languages. As you will see, that some languages will not give you any errors other than the value of infinity. Okay, so in JavaScript, if you type, an expression of 1 or something divided by 0, you will not get an error saying invalid, division divided by 0, right? Some languages will give you the error, some don't. Also depends on IDE too, right? So for example, if you use Eclipse, and if you use Eclipse to program your Java, and you do a division by 0 in Eclipse, it will give you a result of infinity. If you run that same program in, let's just say, NetBeans, you get an error message saying divisible by 0, division by 0. So it depends. But then in JavaScript we have infinity. Anything that is too large, like a really large number beyond the maximum numbers you can hold, it can hold that you get an infinity number as a return. And then if you have a division 0, you also get an infinity, and so on. Okay. The NaN is another property that you will find in many cases as you code JavaScript. This is only when you try to do some type of calculation, mathematical calculation, and the operands are not numbers. Okay, so if you're trying to add in addition, or not the addition, not the concatenation, but you want to add, A plus B, then you get a NaN, and not a number. That's what it stands for, not a number. So this is the value where you will get that. And you also use this just to check to make sure that the result is not a number, or it is not a number, then you can proceed, right? Why? Well, because again, JavaScript is a loosely typed language, so you don't know, the value of a could be a number, but it could already been changed to a string. So when you do a calculation, let's just say a divided by b, if it's a number, if both are numbers, then you get a correct value. Otherwise, if one of those is a string, then you get an n. So you want to make sure that the result of that expression returns not a nan, right? Or if it is a nan, then do something, otherwise don't do it, and vice versa. So this is how you can check those. Okay. So that's a nan, and the other one is another one is also called a very similar to nan. Also, well, I shouldn't say similar. It's not really nan. It just means undefined, and this is the actual value you will get returned for any variable that you declare that you don't assign a value to. Okay, that's what you get. So let's just say, for example, I declare a variable called x, and I did not assign a value to it. Okay, if you don't assign a value to x, then the actual value is undefined. Okay, unlike in Java or some languages, it will give you a default value of 0. Well, because you have to specify the data type, right? But here, because you don't specify the data for x, because x is dynamically assigned, it does not know what data type it is, so therefore it is undefined until you assign it a value. Okay, and the value could be anything, right? Anything that you want to use in there. There's about like 6 or 7 different types. So that's undefined. You can always check to make sure. Let's just say you don't know in your code, at line, code 1005, I want to know if x has been defined. If it's so, what is the value, right? You cannot just assume that x has been defined and then just use it in your code. You get an error. So you can say if x is undefined, therefore has never been assigned a value, then go ahead and do something about it before you can use it. Okay, so that's what undefined is. Null is a value. Okay, it's a value that represents the null value for any data type, right? So in the example above here, if I were to say, x, I've declared x, and instead of leaving it blank like this, if I put x equals null, then now x is no longer undefined. It has a value of null. Okay, null just means nothing, but it is a value, right? So for example here, I can say a student, var student equals null. I initialize student to be a null, hold the value of null, which is nothing, which is very different from not assigning anything at all, which is undefined. So these two are kind of really hard to grasp at first, but I just want to tell you what they mean. Okay, so if you run into an issue where you have a null, that means the variable has been defined and it's been assigned a value of null. Okay, some function properties, eval and uneval. This is a non-standard function. It's not supported by all browsers. That's what I'm going to put it here in orange and red here. Eval is a very, I'll just say like I put a very dangerous function because it will execute the code, whatever code you pass to it. Eval is just what it means. It will evaluate the expression. Whatever expression you put inside the parentheses here, it will evaluate that right away. So if you put like eval 2 plus 4, then it will give you 6, right? And if you put a function in there, it will evaluate and run the function as well. So it's very, very dangerous. At the same time, it's very useful. So you use that with caution. These are some other built-in functions or properties you can use. We will be using some of these. Again, the isNan is here just to test whether a value is a number or not. You can change the you can parse the float or integer number out of that, right? So if it's, for example, the one you probably use the most is maybe int here. Well, int is kind of popular. So if you just want to get the whole number out of this, then you use the parse int, right? So parse int, and then we'll return 3. Whatever these decimal number, it just truncates all of those. The radix here, it just means that you usually pass in also a base number, right? Number base. Usually base 10 is the default. But if you want to use like hex number, it will be like a base 16 or base 8 or base 6, whatever base is going to be. You put that in there and it will return the number type. Okay. Decode URI and encode URI. These are just for decoding and encoding as some reference characters in the browser and URL. So for example, if you have something like this, usually you will probably see this already in a website somewhere. You see a bunch of characters like this, and this is because it's encoded using these special characters so that it's safe for URL and browser. But you can decode it back so that you get something like this, which is more readable by us humans, right? So you can encode and decode back and forth this way. And sometimes you want to encode it this way just to make sure it's safe, right? So again, this is very useful for like SQL injection and things like that. You want to encode it so that it's safe. So let's just see down here, just so example eval, the fundamental objects. Okay, we'll be using these as well, object, function, and boolean type. We'll go over these when we get to those areas, but object is something we'll explore, which is really interesting, also really fun. Function is just a function constructor, how you can write functions in JavaScript. Boolean is the true and false data type, right? So you explore that as well. The other types of here we'll probably not explore in this class are like symbol, error, and a bunch of these here, about like about almost a good list of them, but we may not explore these. Text is important. We will explore strings and regular expressions here later in the chapter. And index collections are about 10 different types. The one we'll be exploring is just basically the arrays. Okay, the one that is something that you already kind of familiar with and know what that is. The others are like the typed arrays. Type means that they have to be of type numbers only. You cannot store other data in there other than just numbers. And again, used for like certain purposes, but we're not going to explore that. So just the high-level array types.